Hi, it's John Ryan with Team Handball News, and joining me are up there in the top corner is '96 Olympian Derek Brown, Myles Bacon in the lower corner, driving, working at the same time, but keeping very focused on the road. Former UNC coach, and Divine Jackson, our ambassador in New York City. How are you guys all doing today?
Doing pretty good, John. Doing pretty good.
Well, thanks, John.
Doing good.
So I know all you guys. I think a lot of the people listening in will know you. So I don't want the full origin story. Well, give a brief background on who you are and how you're involved in handball or were involved in handball. Why don't you start, Derek?
Okay. Derek Brown, DC native, started playing handball right after graduating from LaSalle University in '93, was recruited by the national team as they was looking for athletes, of course, to get ready for the '96 games. One of the fortunate ones to compete and to do well in handball up to '96 and beyond. Still an ambassador of sorts, not as connected as I would have liked to be, but that's starting to change as well. And so always willing to offer my voice and support in the cause of handball.
Excellent. Myles, give us a short spiel.
Sure. Native of Springfield, Ohio, home of John Legend, yay. Also Braxton Miller. I am also a New Hampshire native for a bit, resident, I should say, North Carolina for 20 years. Got involved with UNC's club program and have literally been hooked since the first day. I currently live in South San Diego, and I am linking with a few different people. We've already started a beach club out here, and we're looking to get some more handball involved in the phys ed curriculum here in the county.
Cool. Divine.
Divine Jackson, still USA national team member. Currently residing in Connecticut right now from Hempstead, Long Island, where another '96 Olympian, Mr. Derek Keefe, is from. Also, fun fact, Derek Brown's ex-teammate on the national team. Not telling anybody's age.
50, bro. I'll say it. Every one of those years.
I am New York City's USA ambassador for youth and collegiate sports.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the short intros. I didn't give an introduction on what the topic is here, but let's put two and two together with what's been happening in the world and the fact that you guys are all handball guys. The 2 and 2 is we're going to talk a little bit about race and about team handball and in the United States. With a lot of the stuff going on with the George Floyd tragedy. It's been on everybody's mind. In fact, I saw it on your guys' minds on your social media platforms. And that's why I reached out to you, because I wanted to get your perspective on race as it relates to handball. And first I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk. There's different types of racism. And I have never seen any overt racism in handball, but maybe you guys have seen something different. But I wanted to get your guys' experience in terms of somebody being very overt racist towards you in handball, and just maybe in general compare it to your other sporting experiences. Why don't we we'll start with Derek again.
So in terms of overt racism in handball or in any sport for that matter, nothing where someone came out and said to me, you cannot because you're black, or we're not going to allow you to be a part of this because you're black. But when you look at the landscape of, let's just go with when I started playing handball, there were a number of African-American athletes that started out playing, but there were only 2 of us that were on the Olympic team. So not to say that there was some kind of only a few play, but we know with athletics, those who are good enough will make it. So I'm not going to get into the quality and the caliber of the athletes, but it is kind of with the nature of our sport, can raise some questions as to how come only 2 out of 16 were African Americans when this is a sport that is supposed to be excelling for African American athletes. And I'll just leave that for that right there.
Sure. Myles?
I've not directly, kind of like what Derek said, I've not directly, experienced, blatant to my face racism. As far as handball goes, I have experienced racism in different sports that I've played in my life. From football, kind of quarterback politicking. I was in high school in the 90s, so, there wasn't this, designed to have a two-way kind of quarterback back then. It was much more pocket presence and reading through your cues and this and that. Handball directly, though, I was excited when I first started that there were as many minorities, namely Black people, that were participating when I first started. It's kind of like when you watch television, you can identify with somebody. I was able to identify, with various people when I first encountered the sport, including, Derek Brown, Derek Heath, Robert Mayfield, some guys that I could kind of, play my skills off of and say, oh, I could do that too. So, like I said, directly, not so much. Unfortunately, I haven't really sniffed a bunch of that in my existence.
In fact, Myles, I think, we had a short Facebook exchange. You actually commented that you thought that the handball community was like the most welcoming that you had been involved with.
Without question. I mean, the thing about handball, and it's true for a lot of sports, but handball specifically, we are so relatively small, as well as the interdependence that you have on each other. It's beyond important for handball and handballers to be able to get past the superficial stuff. My experience at Carolina as an undergrad, for instance, all of my best friends to this day, even, we're just a patchwork quilt. There is no way on God's green earth we would have ever gotten to hang out with each other for handball. And then there we were, people from all races and whatnot, different portions of the country, coming together for this sport that we knew very little of, but we knew we liked a lot.
Yeah. Hey, Divine?
Similar to, the other 2 guys. I have not experienced it faced on with USA Handball. I basically grew up into this sport. So from 15 to now, I haven't seen it. Haven't even heard of anything that kind of symbols it. But from outside looking in, sometimes certain things you do have questions, as far as like, leaderships and, some people on the board where you wonder, like, is there anybody that's going to take that next step, or was they not qualified? Other than that, no.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the real topic, I think. And I think it's a topic in a lot of sports beyond handball. And that's the, maybe it's covert or subliminal, but Derek, you alluded it to a little bit, and I'll go further back in time than you. I have heard at different times that, you don't know whether it's true or not, or maybe it happened because of other reasons, where there wasn't any really recruiting into the African American community, and you could say that there's some reasons for that. The cynical reasons are like, hey, we want to have our guys make the team. If we bring in 15 Derek Heaths, we're going to have 14 Derek Heaths. Well, probably you need somebody to play goalie. But you would have a heavily weighted African American team, and that was the cynical response. But a lot of it also, I think, is structurally how we were set up. I would go so far as I actually heard reverse affirmative action one time, where I heard someone say the only reason why B.J. Johnson got on the Olympic team was because he was a black guy. And I've played with him. I mean, that is just silly. With the idea of like, we need more black guys so we can do a better job of recruiting and we can get more. And actually the desire is the reverse of that. We really, really want more black guys playing, because we've seen what happened in basketball, which used to be lily white, and in football. Once the floodgates opened, everybody, the idea of just having one or two black guys start on your college basketball team was absurd after a while, because
Right.
people want to win. And so I guess that gives you kind of a flow of my perspective. And Derek, I kind of sense you were chomping at the bit to take on this topic a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want this to become a whole commentary against what was, but it's hard not to see that. When you talk about the sports that have integrated, you mentioned basketball. There was a time that basketball was an all-white sport, and then we were allowed to be on a team. Football, all-white sport, until owners decided that they would have black athletes on their teams. So you look at a sport like handball. We're not talking about hockey. We're not talking about golf, which are still predominantly Euro sports. But when you have the talent, the skill level, and the ability to do the thing that is supposed to be necessary to be successful in the sport, not to say that white athletes or any other nationality of athlete can do it, but when you don't have the black athlete, all we have been known for is running fast, jumping high, and being strong. Those are things you need to play handball. So why are we not more integrated? Why haven't we been more integrated? Why do we have however many Olympiads that we've had, and how many African-American athletes were on the men Olympic team? We had far more on the women's side, but on the men's side, I believe it's 3 of us. Well, I think it's 4 of us. One guy I don't know, but I know BJ well, and me and Derek. And so I'm sure Divine would have made a team, Gary would have made a team if we would have qualified. But again, this is what we have. And so why has the numbers been so low? Are you telling me that in 72, 76, 80, 84, 88, that we didn't have black athletes who could have learned the sport enough to make the team? I can't accept that.
Myles.
You're muted, bud.
I lost audio somehow. I think if it is my turn, I'll just go ahead. I really wholeheartedly believe that handball can very much save a lot of black athletes, communities, etc. Once I got a hold of handball and realized the basic mechanism and virtually no startup of the sport, I started thinking of all these people in my hometown that were so ridiculously athletic, so great at basketball and football and virtually everything they ever touched. And then here I was, so low on that totem pole, yet having an impact in the sport. I really fully believe that, in this era where we're kind of coming to terms about football and concussions and all of these things, that handball very well could and should be kind of placed in a little bit higher realm. And in so much as, black and black community. I think also it was a bit, I don't know how to say it best, because I want to try to massage this a little bit. It was a little bit frustrating trying to recruit black students to the Carolina team, for instance. I could go into Wool and Gym and see all kinds of kids of all kinds of colors. I take a handball with me. Hey, man, I see you can dunk. You think you can dunk this? And then I've got a 20-second window where I really either got to catch this guy and reel him in, or he's just going to walk out. And, when you think of a place like UNC, for instance, we're talking about Confederate statues and all this stuff. Dean Smith was a pioneer, at least for the ACC, in a time and a place where, there was going to be no integration. Here's a guy who literally integrated portions of a school, let alone an entire league or a sport. So I do kind of have that held out hope that Carolina can still be a bastion for that. But I also recognize that in this day and age, you kind of have to have something to incentivize people. Why should I quit my track of going towards football or whatever sport if there's no in game? Like, I'm not going to be able to get paid for my talent. I might as well play semi-pro basketball or whatever. So those are some of the more frustrating elements.
Yeah. Divine, you want to?
John, do me a favor, real quick. Just repeat the question that you asked.
Well, we got into a discussion of covert racism. What is there something that is getting fewer is racism causing fewer guys to play handball, or is it other issues such as the structure of the sport, finances? And I think Derek and Myles both touched on that a little bit. Perhaps maybe you could, I understand you've been coaching basketball and a little bit about recruiting and stuff. Maybe that kind of, you can touch on that point, or take any other aspect of this topic that you want.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I totally agree with the other two guys. The risk does not the risk is too much for the reward. For me, Myles probably don't know this, but I was actually on my way to UNC back in 2003. Yeah. Pan Am Games in Dominican Republic. During that time, I was on my way into the door, but we know the coach at that time, it didn't go well for UNC. So, but yes, I was on my way there. But Jesus speaks on, like, for me, kid from the inner city, I couldn't afford a school like UNC. I couldn't afford schools like Stanford or anything like that. So, when going to those college nationals and seeing those big time schools play, and to find out that they're club sports and not varsity sports, that was a big letdown for me, because that's one of the biggest attractions. The fact that, I can do better for my family. The fact that, in my case, be the first one out of my family to get a college diploma from playing sports, that was a big honor and opportunity. And handball didn't, to this day, handball still doesn't have that when it comes to scholarships. Also, at the same time, I've coached high school kids that are now playing overseas, and they're in Switzerland, they're in Sweden, they're in Romania, and they're on the same club team as the handball teams, and they're seeing how those guys get paid, and they're coming back to me like, Coach, I didn't know it was just insane over here. Why don't we have it in the States? And, as Derek said, for handball to be the most Americanized sport, and the fact that, when a kid can run fast, jump high, throw hard, and it's not a professional sport, it kind of, sheds away about 75% of your top athletes right there, because they're going to go to the sports that pay, the sports that benefit them in the long run. So racism will never be that factor when it comes to handball. It will be the others, the finances. It would be being able to, take care of your family in the long run. And right now, we're just not there to support that.
You know what, Divine, to kind of piggyback on that real quick, when I was playing in the early 90s, a lot of the the propaganda around attracting athletes was, well, if you're not on the track of being a professional athlete, you're the one that we're looking at. So we're looking at the lower level basketball player, the lower level football player, the lower level track athletes, or whoever, who you were good for college, you're good for high school, whatever, but you're not going to be pro. Here's something that can take you somewhere. We also had that carrot of the Olympics in front of me. So I had something that I saw as a tangible goal to go for. But when you think about finances and being able to participate in something, finances is major. So not to say that handball operates as an elite sport, an elitist sport, but there is either a cost to play or a cost that you have to sacrifice for playing. And so while we don't have to pay for court time, well, some club teams do have to pay for court time. If you have enough players, that can be kind of meted out amongst all of you. But let's say, X gym is going to charge you, $300 a night once a week. Well, for a club team, that can be pretty steep. And then you got to get into the players' pockets. Well, I'm working a job and I'm single, but I'm not making that kind of money for a sport that I don't even know where it's going to take me. So all of these are factors, and I would call it racism, but it is a separation of sorts, because if you are, I'm making a joke right now, so don't come at me, but if you're a trust fund baby and you don't have to worry about money, okay, this is something to do, and I get to run around for a little bit, and if it does something, or we get to go have a tournament this weekend, and we can go up to Jersey, go up to Flanders, whatever it is, that's fun. But for us from the inner city, we're kind of looking for a way out. And if handball looked to be something that can take us out more than basketball could, then a lot more of us would jump on it. But there's nothing there that looks like it's a way out. It's just another thing. Then we get faced with the reality of, oh, well, thank you for your time. We didn't qualify for this tournament. We didn't qualify for these games. And we're going to go a different direction. So now you've invested all this time that there's no payoff for.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is that it's a big part of that is socioeconomic.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, in our country, African Americans are a greater percentage of them are in that lower socioeconomic thing. So where does it become a racism thing, or it's a finances thing? Sometimes it's which is causing the other.
It's all in the same spectrum. It's like if you get hit on one side, you get hit on the other side.
Yeah, and define. You brought up a point. With guys playing basketball in Romania and Switzerland. So I'm assuming these were basketball players in college. I'm not sure what level they play. They might have been a lower level Division I player. But I mean, even Division II, Division III players can find a place to go play basketball in Europe. Maybe not making huge bucks, but they're getting paid to play the game they love. Is that what you were alluding to?
Yeah.
And that they already know how to play that game. For them to take up handball and learn how to play handball to now that they've seen it in Romania and going like, I didn't realize it was a big thing. It's still not something that they can, turn on a dime and become great at.
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And that's one of the bigger issues that I've seen since the 90s, and as things started to become more professionalized in Europe, not just in handball, but in other sports, there were more opportunities for people to go make a living in their sport. So they made it a little bit tougher to recruit some of those guys. And the type of guys that you needed in a lot of cases were those trust fund babies. It's not just a problem for handball. I mean, you take a look at any minor sport, even if it's intercollegiate, like lacrosse or volleyball or water polo, rugby. most of those athletes tend to be white, and we could probably do a podcast. They could do it. They could do a sports podcast like what we're doing now on their sport and the issues that they have.
Well, you could talk about those sports, but at the same time, when it comes to the universities and institutions, those sports are funded. Where certain schools, you can go on a full ride or even some type of scholarship for water polo, even rugby. I was at American International College where the rugby teams was fully funded.
Yeah.
So they're recruiting kids, and kids are going to school for free to play rugby.
Yeah.
So if UNC had a stack program where half the money is academic, half the money is scholarship, just imagine the type of athletes that Myles or Wade can go and get if they had some type of scholarship money, let alone Penn State, Texas A&M, University of Cincinnati. Like those schools, even with just the name alone, if they walked out to any city and said, listen, I'm going to help pay for your higher education. Would you come and play handball? I guarantee you, you will have tryouts of 40 kids that you will have to cut.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're rolling right into the next topic that I wanted to bring up, and it's okay. We've defined the situation. What could we do to increase African American participation in the sport? And I guess Divine just outlined one possibility.
Right.
Funding has to come with that in order to do that.
Right. Well, the funny thing, when I started, we had the residency program. You remember that, John? So we had to sacrifice something to train every day. Now, can someone pick up a sport that they've never played before and in 3 years make an Olympic team? Yeah, it's possible because I did it. But I also was playing every day. Yes, sir.
Time out. It certainly was possible back in 1993. It was certainly possible in 1993. I am not so sure. I don't want to get off on a tangent.
No.
Especially if the dual citizens that we have now on our team.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you've watched our current men's national team, Derek.
Yeah.
And the level of dual citizen talent is pretty high now. So
But using the term dual citizen, I have a problem with that. No disrespect to any of those players. Played with a few of them, seen a lot more of them in the more recent years. We're the U.S. team, U.S. athletes. I don't like the dual citizen route. Yes, they've been playing longer. They have more skill, but why can't we grow our own? That's my issue. That's my going forward. So if the easy is to get dual citizens, then we're always going to be behind. But if we're trying to grow our sport, then we need to grow our sport. And how do we do that? We have to have mechanisms in place at every level where they can play, learn, grow, advance to the next level, play, learn, grow, and be able to play in the Olympics.
Yeah.
That's the only way it can work.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess and it's a further complication in that because the talent pool of our Americans who were raised in other countries, I avoided the dual citizen there. They're Americans. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where you got a passport, you're an American. All right. That's the simple aspect. The reason is though is that the fact that the level is a little bit higher. Now it's more complicated to bring in a stateside guy and have him make the national team. It's a little bit more.
Is it though?
Yeah.
Let's be.
It is. It is.
Critique because I want to basically put it out there that growing up, it was the club teams. You pick members from the club teams.
Right.
Now, if you put some of these guys on some of these club teams, do you think they will have the same success that they're having now on some of these club teams? Mind you, let's just say, perfect example, Ty Reed. Okay, Ty Reed is with New York Athletic Club, correct? He was also with the residency program. He was also with United. Now, when he was with Team United and they had their club team, the success of that club team was not as high as when he went to New York Athletic Club.
I don't think he's the right example. Let's take Abu Fofana.
Okay.
And put him on any club team in the U.S. right now. All right, immediately that team would be better. Okay, you take Ian and Patrick Hooter. Okay, same story.
Now it would be better skill-wise because the one thing that
skill-wise,
see that's the one thing that people like. That's another reason why I am a big advocate for a American head coach on the national team, because growing up playing, okay, teams might have been more skilled than us, but when it came to hard-nosed defense and hitting, a lot of teams knew that they was in for a fight. Now, watching some of the games lately, it has been more European style where you're not going to get that much. We wasn't afraid to play down 5-on-6 or 6-on-5, but we knew that push come to shove, if you tried to come within 10 to 6 meters, you was going to get hit. With the new generation now, that's not happening.
Yeah, I agree with you, so especially
that physicality on the club circuit still exists with Cal Heat, still exists with New York City and New York Athletic Club. So if they were on those other 3 teams and tried to play those 3 teams, it will be a different discussion because of that physicality.
Yeah. We're getting a little bit on a tangent. I've been a little disappointed at times with our current men's national team's defense. I think it could be tougher, but the reality is, especially offensively, some of the offensive skill set of some of the players. I'll go back to, I was on the team a little bit before Derek. There wasn't a single American who'd been born up in Europe that could make our team. They came with us to a couple of them tried out at the 93 World Championships. One guy maybe could have helped us, but they weren't good enough. It was a combination of athletic ability and technical skill. I'm just saying, for whatever reason, right now with the men's team, we've got some talented players, and it's a little bit of a tangent from our current discussion, but the amount of time it would take somebody to make that team right now, it would be really tough for somebody to make that team in a couple of years. It really would be.
Maybe coming from zero it would be, but if we have people that are already in the pipeline playing at Carolina, playing in the club teams, playing out in California somewhere, if they're already playing and they have the kind of structured coaching that mirrors whatever the national team's level of ability and skill set is supposed to be, because it's all supposed to be feeding toward the national team is what it should be. But if it's not that, if it's just everybody's operating in isolation and they're playing this way in New York, they're playing this way in Carolina, they're playing this way in Texas, they're playing this way in California, it's going to be a difference. So why is there a difference? I should be able to go on a team that Divine is on and be able to do everything that is needed to be done. Go to a team where Myles is and be able to do the same thing because we're all on the same page and we're all trying to make the national team. That's where it's not there because there is no pulling to the national team. Right. The national team is operating and doing whatever they want to do, and we have all these programs that they're just playing. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think logically we should be at a point where 80% of our guys are coming stateside.
Should be.
And it's just because there's more people stateside than living in Europe and other places. And we would want to have the structures in place so that talent pool of athletes that we have, we'll take anybody, but just the mere fact that we have the structures in place that most of our guys would come from the U.S. So to try and bring the discussion back into that, how do we build the structures so that becomes the reality? How do we do that, Myles?
Let me hop in for a second, because one of the I guess one of my contributions to handball in the past decade plus is that, you know, I've been able to kind of bring Americans who know nothing about the sport into the sport and make competent to above competent to national team type entities. We need to have more structure on smaller and lower levels. What do I mean? You know, infiltration of PE curricula, for instance. We need to have handball units where kids are exposed for more than 3 days at a time. You know, in my mind, what I'm trying to do here in San Diego is set up kind of a small league between, you know, middle schools. You know, start something up there. Now, you know, Wangenheim is playing against Montgomery, and Wangenheim, you know, the best kids from each of the class get to make the Wangenheim team, and they're going to play Montgomery. And you can incorporate that in a general Olympic type day. But the problem is, you know, for instance, myself, I didn't start until I was 19. You know, I love handball, and I played for, you know, the better part of 2 decades. And the amount of skill that I had, you know, if I were Swedish, I would have only been about 27. You know what I'm saying? I would have been entering my peak of my prime. But because I got it at 19, I only had but so many years where I was priming and still, you know, capable. You know, we need to find ways to actually, let me say this, let me back up. We need idiots. We need idiots. How do I say that better? We need people who do not care about money or time, just knowing that they have to invest handball knowledge and skill into people. There are not enough idiots in our realm right now, you know, in so much as that, you know, I can speak for myself, Wade, you know, in our program, people who would literally, you know, sacrifice their weekends to drive up to a West Point or wherever to, you know, spend the extra hours after practice, after you've already spent a whole day at work, trying to help, you know, a kid get their, you know, 3-step approach right. We need people to be involved in that way, and more, we need to be able to coach people or, you know, kind of train people in different pockets of the country. So it's not like you're just learning this in Utah or you're only going to learn this style in Minnesota. We need to kind of come up with a rubric across the board where everybody can say, oh, this is what they're learning on, you know, weeks 1 through 3. You know, this is where we can do that. Okay, so we should be about here right now. And then that way, everybody kind of comes up so that when we get to that next level, you know, everybody has a similar idea of, okay, these are the skills that we have as a group. These are the skeletal, you know, entities of what we're trying to get created. And now we can add a little bit more meat to it because these kids are older, a little bit smarter, a little bit more, you know, athletically intelligent. We literally have no example outside of a handful of people where people in the United States have gotten the game before, say, middle school. You know, Divine's one of the rare exceptions in that regard. I know that we had a couple guys at Carolina that came up through the ATH program under Chris Kappelman. You know, Alex, Mike Applegate, you know, just 2 guys that just jumped. Those guys were sick as hell. I mean, like, you know, Alex McGlynn, you know, is still a row beast. I'm sure if he just went out and picked up a handball right now, he'd be great because he learned a lot of these skills from an early age. It's almost been defaulted in it. So we need to find more ways to create grassroots things so as to feed. You know, this was the answer that soccer took over the years. You know, it's lacrosse has kind of, you know, built into that some, but we need more grassrooting, you know, so as to not have to feel like we need to depend on, you know, European residing American citizens, let's say.
Well, I won't use the term idiots.
I will. I'm an idiot, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
I'll use the term highly dedicated, motivated, committed, passionate people.
That's very nice of you. I'm an idiot for doing what I did for as long as I did. You know, to sacrifice a career, yeah.
Because the problem is you're only going to find so many of those guys around. We need to have something that's more sustainable, that is more practical, that can be scaled up. We'll take those guys and we'll, you know, give them some resources to go do something. Like, and I guess I'll turn this over a little bit to Divine, you know, and that maybe he's getting some resources to do some things that he wanted to do in terms of grassroots. so kind of a two-part question. What are some of the things that you're doing, Divine? And the second part is, do you see anything that could be done with a specific African American intent to target, some of these guys that, hey, we just have to look at the basketball and football teams and say, wow, we could get, a group of guys at a young age and get them going, we could really start to make some headway.
Well, for the first part, there are a couple of challenges when it comes to the New York City area. When it comes to bringing in the youth handball, one, finding a sizable gym. In New York, we don't go wide, we go up. So some of those gyms are, wall to wall, bleacher to bleacher. So, but other than that, it's just getting the kids involved. New York Edge is doing an excellent job. New York City, thank you to New York City, helping getting the New York Edge started. They had a clinic out in Brooklyn, about 150 kids, getting them going. So the one thing that New York bigs on is competition. So the one thing I'm definitely going to try and do or set up is Battle of the Boroughs, Battle of Long Island, because that definitely gets the kids excited, knowing that if I'm from Brooklyn, I want to see what Queens have or go up against the Bronx, stuff like that. So that's one thing that's in the plans for the future. And the second part, I'm sorry.
Oh, the second part was, a specific African American target or opportunity, and I'll tie on a little bit of that. I saw the newsletter that the USA CEO Barry Siff put out, talked about 500 memberships, for African Americans, opportunity, and that's a small thing, but that also can help get the ball rolling. Do you see anything like that can be done to target some of our African Americans that are underrepresented?
Well, we're in the era of social media, so a lot of the kids they look for people to relate to, and that's the one thing that we definitely have to find is more African American athletes in handball to market and broadcast, and help run clinics in the New York City area. If just looking back at some of my old video is probably just as ancient as Derek and Myles. So me trying to do it right now, me trying to be that person is not going to be the one. We're gonna have to find much younger guys that are going to be willing to be in the forefront of that. So that's the next step, and definitely getting more colleges involved, because for the kids in the inner city, like I said, they need a way out. And the fact that if they can go to an event and see St. John's or Hofstra or Fordham having teams out there, that's definitely one step of keeping their interest high, and building from the high school, from the middle school up.
So Myles, what about the possibility, and maybe you were around, or maybe you're familiar with the Southeast Team Handball Conference and what they did?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. Do you know anything about the program that they had at Benedict College? It was an HBCU.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you could see that, but that's my trophy from Southeastern Collegiate Team Handball, circa 2001. I think we'd have to speak more specifically with Derek Heath, or maybe I think it was Derek and maybe Dominique Dumont. I'm not totally sure how they, got Benedict into the fold, but they had Benedict, they had Presbyterian, they had Lander, they had a bunch of schools I had never heard of. And one of the cool things about having Benedict in there, not only as an HBCU, it was just cool to have another school that we knew played handball. When the SETHC was probably at its highest, there were schools all over South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. And that, I don't know how that whole thing percolated, but we definitely look forward to playing against those guys.
Yeah.
And they, like, as these two could explain, there's something about the fun and nuance of rivalry when you're playing handball. It's one of the most gentlemanly sports for such a relatively savage entity. So to go more specifically, I think kind of to back up what Divine said, you almost have to have an identifier, like somebody who, when you watch, something happen, kids can see themselves therein. Again, I don't know if I would have been as into handball, aside from the kinetics, had it not been for like Bob Mayfield, being able to have him, show me things in games, and then after the game come over and say, yo, just so you know, you don't have to look at the circle when you're passing it to him. It's like, oh, I know that, but I didn't know I couldn't. So I think, to kind of get back to what Divine was talking about, maybe there's some kind of circuit we could do, like assemblies, where we could set up a demo and have a couple kids participate, so as to help kids identify and see themselves. Oh, that guy right there looks like he can jump. He reminds me of my uncle, myself, whatever. I'm watching him do this thing in front of our school. I want to learn how to do that too. He played on the national team. What's the national team? I'd like to play for America. Just being able to put these things literally in people's faces.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was looking at with. I never saw Benedict College play, but I was intrigued with the thought that an HBCU played. I can count on one hand in all my years of playing and experience when I saw a team that was majority African American taking the field. I mean, right. and I was responsible for one of them. And I played on a base basketball team when I was in the Air Force. I was the only white guy on the team, and I was always talking to everybody about this handball game. And I think to just shut Ryan up, they said, all right, Ryan, we'll go play in a tournament for you. So right. I had a team of, we were a solid basketball team. We beat teams by 30, 40 points all the time. And it was a great time. And I just said, wow, if I could get these guys to play handball. And they went to the outdoor tournament in California, the Ventura, Copa Ventura. It was the West Coast Flanders. And we had a solid side for a bunch of guys that had never played before. We didn't win, but boy, everybody respected our team. And then the second time I remember was Derek Heath brought up a bunch of kids that he had in Atlanta, boys and girls clubs. They came up to DC and they played in the tournament. Those are the only two times that I personally saw a team that was majority African American. I guess I heard a recent podcast about the Texas Western basketball team that won the national championship against Kentucky. Five black guys taking the court against five white guys, underdogs, and they beat them. It wasn't even close. And to me, that's like the vision of what you can see. If a bunch of young African American kids see a team go out there and kick some butt, it's that visual. This guy looks like me. It gives me an example of what can be done. So, do any of you guys see a possibility where we got limited resources, but maybe some of those focused on a demonstration concept, if you will, like a new Benedict College somewhere?
Well, but even with that, John, it still has to be something that people can look at and say, I can do this. This person looks like me. What has happened in the NBA over the last 4 or 5 years, the little guy is now feeling that he can play basketball on the pro level because Steph Curry is shooting from 40 feet. You can learn to shoot deep. You may not be as successful, but you can learn to shoot deep. There are going to be more people that can shoot deep than there are going to be 6'8" freaks of nature like LeBron James. And so if I can see something and relate to it, you may not be as fast as D Brown. You may not be able to jump as high as D Heath. You may not be as strong as Divine, but I see those people and they look like me and I see them being successful. Why are we not highlighting those. What do we have right now available to us that we can highlight and show? Gary Hines, the dude jumps higher than I've ever thought about jumping. And he's got skill. He's been playing in Europe for 1,000 years now. Why is he not being highlighted? Yes. He's 35 years old. He's still young enough that he's still good enough that he should be highlighted. I'm past my prime. I'm 50. D. Heath is 55. BJ is 60. Mayfield is about to be 60. So, I mean, we don't need to be looking back at the 50s and overs. We got 20s and 30s that we should be highlighting and saying, okay, what are they doing? And these are American-born. American-born is how we're going to have to do this. So going to the HBCUs, I'm telling you, if we'd have done that between 93 and 96, there's some bros that I was on the team with that wouldn't be on the team. Real, for real, for real, for real. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. When we were up in Philly, we could have just went down to Temple. Even though Temple wasn't a black school, we could have went down to Temple, had some real hoopers. Could have came down to D.C., real hoopers that just wasn't doing nothing, but couldn't afford it. So if we hit some HBCUs, for real, guys that's just hungry to do something. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but you give me something to look at, I'm going to give this thing a shot. That's how we're going to make a change. All the other stuff can happen, but we need to figure out what our focus is. If it's going to be an inclusive sport, then we have to have more, and I know we're talking about black and white, but I would rather keep it a black and white conversation as opposed to bringing in Euros. If we're going to keep it black and white, then we need to have more black inclusivity in this sport and give them an opportunity to be successful. Because not everybody is going to be idiots and say, well, you know what? I'm not working right now and I'm not making any money, but I'm playing handball. That's not going to happen anymore. I played handball for 3 years before the Olympics. I worked maybe 8 months in those 3 years. All of 95 and 96 didn't work. I don't know how I survived because all I was getting was 108.33 a month. 108.33 a month plus whatever the elite athlete stipend was. I think it was $3,000 as well. So that's all I was making to play handball. And what was the payoff for me? Making the Olympic team. Well, if there's no Olympics, why would I do it? Yeah. I'd go work at McDonald's before I'd not make any money to play handball, get beat up every day, go to a country, get spit at. What really? Play handball, travel the world. Isn't that what they told us? So there has to be more to that. There has to be more to that. I'm sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent. But I love it. Wouldn't change it, but it's that model can't work now. It has to be something more. It has to be something that they see, and it has to be a structure that's going to take them somewhere. Whatever that somewhere is, it has to take them somewhere. You can't just expect somebody to spend, 5 hours a day or 5 hours or 10 hours a weekend and playing this sport and getting beat up and then what? It's not enough.
Myles, if I gave you $10,000 to start a African-American focused program in San Diego, what would you do? Or what, in broader terms, is there anything African-American focused?
You go to Vegas and put it on black and try to turn it into $1 million.
It's interesting. San Diego is it's its own interesting set of communities of blackness. There are pockets of black people, Logan Heights, Lemon Grove, La Mesa. Some absolutely outstanding names have come from there. We're talking about Marcus Allen. We're talking about Terrell Davis. We're talking about Reggie Bush. There's all kind of talent here. So what would I do? Immediately, I go grab my buddy Paris Vernon, who played with ATH. he and I will immediately go to the various athletic departments of the various school districts here in the area. I'm looking right now on a map. There are no fewer than 17, right? So if we go to 17 and only get 3 to even consider us, now we've got money to, buy, a short set of goals for 3, for 3 schools or 3 school districts, however, they want to do it. Then we could set up our demo program going around. Hey, this week, for 2-3 weeks, it's going to be over here at Parker, over here, it's going to be, Chalmers or whatever it is, we'll go to different spots. More though, I think to create kind of an after school type situation, that's kind of a goal of mine. I think if we can create almost a handball academy effect to where it's like, hey, if you come do homework for an hour and a half, we'll do handball teaching for an hour, and then you can have free gym space, like something to encourage kids to want to be involved in that. But that's literally where I would go. Like the first thing I would do is, grab parents, we're going to different places, and just kind of talking our way into school districts.
Divine, anything? I mean, we talked a little bit about, you kind of got on a broader thing of what you're doing, Battle of the Boroughs. Anything that you would try and do specifically?
Hold on, give me 2 seconds. I'm not done taking notes from Myles.
Wow.
It's a little bit similar. I'm kind of doing the same thing. I kind of got a head start because a specific gentleman, Laszlo, he's been doing it since 77, 74, maybe earlier than that. But from where I first started, we had a high school league. We had 6 high schools: Hempstead, Roslyn, Garden City. So we had those leagues to have the high school kids something to look forward to and build from there. So it would definitely be to try and bring that back and make it stronger. But no, Myles hit it right on the nail. You got to go and personally introduce yourself and, get into the school districts. So, but with the $10,000, the first thing I'm doing is I'm renting out a gym, and I am definitely hosting a collegiate tournament and inviting all the public schools to come. So that's definitely the first thing I would do with those $10,000, because now, as a middle schooler or as a high schooler, if I get to go see those schools in person play, now I'm like, okay, they actually have this in college. So that's definitely what I'm doing with that money.
All right, so we talked a little bit about talked a lot of bit about the grassroots and some of the issues bringing folks in. Now, Derek, I sent all you guys a copy of the demographics. John Ryan likes playing with numbers and looking at stuff, but I actually found this. I didn't even realize it existed, but there's tracking of data in terms of how diverse all of the sports federations are, in terms of national team players, in terms of board representatives, staff, etc. And the numbers weren't as bad as I thought that they were going to be. They actually, it depends a little bit on what your benchmark is as to what you're going to. It also uses the people of color.
That's where
I'm sorry.
That's what I keyed in on when I looked at the data.
Yeah.
People of color doesn't necessarily mean African American. So,
well, and I was, educate me a little bit on that, because I hear that used more and more all the time, and I think that there's black on white racism. Myles, you're living in San Diego. I'm sure you're seeing some Hispanic derogatory terms used once in a while. Asians, even Native Americans. And at one time we would have blown the benchmark out of the water because we had a Native American team playing
Right.
handball.
Right.
Do we need to break it down into subsets instead of the broader people of color acronym
Well,
or name?
I personally think so. And I look only at my high school. My high school like prided itself on its minority population. I want to say like it was like 45% minority, which sounds awesome. 45% out of 1,000 kids, you're talking about 400 or 500 folks at that point, obviously. But then the real number that we're talking about, as far as African American kids, there were like 70. You know what I'm saying? So you can't wash all of that together. A lot of times we hear person of color, colored, minority, whatever, and we're grouping all kinds of people into that. If we want to talk about minority stuff, we could talk about quote unquote minority stuff, but we're not talking about minority stuff right now. We're talking literally about the African American experience, at least per handball, and those numbers are going to be infinitely smaller by default almost. Like I look at the turbulence we've had at the head of USA Team Handball. We can't get more than 5 years of consistency, because things turn over so much. So how can we have a long-term goal when we can't have a short-term, sitting president or director or whatever? It's hard to formulate these things on a long-term basis when somebody else comes in and says, yeah, but that's not the way I want to look at it. And I think that we have to have more involvement and input from guys like like us, like D Heath, people, Gary Hines, people who are definitely in the fold, who have been a part of the whole thing, and like I said, who are American born per se, who know the American athletic pedigree. Because it's one thing to market ourselves as one thing, but when we don't look for a Nike, Jordan, Adidas type endorsement, we know how much that's going to impact the Black community. Black people will not wear Bobo Kids or wherever. You know what I'm saying? Like, branding matters, and we need to be mindful of these type things.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that topic?
No, that he hit everything on the nail for me. I think the political statement is person of color, but we're really talking about Black. We're really talking about the Black athlete, the African American community. And yeah, it's nice to say, even to branch from minority, because of course minority, then you can include women. But no, we're talking about persons of color. So now we're talking about everything that's not white. Yeah. And so when we're talking about white versus everybody else, and then you take it down to the subsets of, well, what are we really talking about? We're talking about how come we don't have any major Black representation on the board for USA Team Handball? How come we don't have any major representation on the national team of African American athletes for USA Team Handball? How come we don't have any coaches on either national team that are African American for USA Team Handball? Then that's a different conversation, because yeah, we have Swedish, we have African, we have French, we have Puerto Rican, we have South American, but where's the African American community? It's not there. It's not there.
Well, if you look at the percentages, if you go and say African Americans are 14% of U.S. population, that's where the numbers don't look so bad, even though they did person of color. You take the board. Basically, you're talking about one
Right.
and a half or 1 1/3 board member, and T was a board member for several years, so that factored into that. We don't currently have an African American board member, and maybe that'll change. With I guess they'll have an AAC election either this year or next year. That could be an African American athlete. And then you got coaches. If you want to factor in the beach handball coaches, I guess we would have 2, 4, 6, 8 coaches. So again, you'd be talking one coach. So I mean, I don't really like quotas. I think they can be good in terms of a benchmarking sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when you're talking smaller numbers, it can really be. It can look. It could look bad and maybe not be bad, or it could look good and really maybe not be good because the numbers are so low.
Same with the Rooney Rule. You got 32 pro teams, and if they say you have to at least interview a real interview for a minority candidate. Well, how many black coaches do we currently have now that hasn't already been fired? What's it, 4? I think it's 4. I don't even know that.
Well, then look at the percentage of athletes in the NFL that are African American, and it's crazy. I could turn around and say, well, look at the percentage of African American athletes playing handball. Well, it's no wonder we don't have as many African American, coaches. It gets a little gets a little convoluted when you rely too much on quotas. But it's something good to look at in terms of where we stand. And I certainly could make the argument is, you look at the athletes playing basketball, you look at the athletes playing football. To me, the best handball player is somebody that played basketball, maybe played football because he can take a hit or two, because you can't, it's not a namby-pamby sport. And you could say, why is, ideally we would be, I don't know what the percentage is. It'd be more than what we have now. And take a look at France. France, to me, you're talking a little bit earlier about, show the African-American community something. The number of African descent players playing for France is off the charts for the percentage of African descent people in France. And that's a factor of their overseas departments and their immigrants from Africa. It's the same thing with their soccer team.
When you talk about the expansion of African citizens throughout of Europe, that was something that was born out of why ever the reason they left their country, and they found a place. And so I love French handball. Don't mistake what I'm saying. But if they would have stayed in their country and had an opportunity to play in their country, French handball wouldn't be as strong as it is. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm going to say.
No, I agree, Derek. Just in the sense that, colonization matters. Look at the German soccer team. Look at the French handball team. Spain, Spanish basketball team. Didn't they have Serge Ibaka? You know what I'm saying? Like, colonization matters. We as America have Puerto Rico and the Philippines, and don't even really get Puerto Rico like that. So that's going to factor in a ton. That's not to say that France doesn't have some variant of a model that we could kind of hope to replicate, but you're taking somebody from a completely different situation. As well, France has leagues that these guys can and women can go to and say, hey, if you want to leave, XYZ country and come here, we think you could play with the national team. You run with this club right here. We'll track your progress, and then boom, you might be on the national team. We don't really have that here. Maybe we send them to NIAC or NYC or, San Francisco Cal Heat, but we still don't have, anything to otherwise incentivize them, by. This is still America. Capitalism still matters after age 18.
It would have been nice if we could have had something along the lines, maybe not on the same level, but along the lines of MLS, where we understood that the Euro Soccer League was key, but we wanted to have something replicated in the U.S. Maybe not everybody's going to be profi, but at least there's something there that they can have regular games, regular competition, and have it feel like something. Because again, we want something to be the outcome of this, not no disrespect to the college nationals or to our national championships. What does that really do on the broad scape of our country? How many people know about handball's national championships? How many people care about handball's national championships? Who cares about college nationals? See, we're operating on such a low scale that we're doing these things. We're putting a lot of effort in it for the handball community. But if we're trying to reach out, we're not doing a good job of it because nobody knows outside of the handball community. You talk about track championships, you may not run track, but it's on TV. You may not swim, but the championships are on TV. there has to be something to see this thing so that people can say, oh, you played handball. I heard about that once. Oh, you played in 96. Well, damn, that's almost 30 years ago.
Well, maybe we'll have the college national championships, and it'll be Howard University, coached by 96 Olympian Derek Brown, taking on Air Force on ESPN Plus.
That'll be a black team versus a white team.
As a sad Army team looks on, not getting their 15th in a row. Maybe that's what we'll see. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we've, well, let's try. What would you guys see as victory? What would you see as like, okay, I've been trying to, look at the, tangible kind of benchmark, is there anything that you guys could sum up as we close? Like, I'll be happy that we've made progress in 5 years if I see this.
Well, you already said it. And Derek said it as well. Put the national championships on TV. That's what's going to get the kids' interest. Like, what's crazy about it is that every 4 years, all team owners get a splurge of emails. Hey, I seen handball on the Olympics. I seen it at NBC or ABC on the TV at 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. Do you have a club team? Or they look like, okay, after that splurge of the 4 years, it dies down. Well, if you have national championships every year, then every year you're going to get a splurge of emails. You might even get a splurge of new teams, because the fact that now that it is being televised, those teams will want to go out there no matter the product, because even with the MLS, some of those games was not pretty games that when they first got on TV.
Correct.
But the fact of the matter is that because it was on TV and the owner saw the product, now that one, it increased their exposure. 2, they was able to get more sponsors now because the sponsors could see themselves on TV. So now when you get that more money, you can go out and get the better players. You can make better salary negotiations of bringing them in. Then now New York Red Bulls go from sharing a stadium to buying their own stadium.
Yeah.
So if we get college nationals or even just the open national championships on TV, that right there will increase productivity and membership for the next 5 years, because everybody will be looking forward to the national championships, because now you can add in qualifications for the national championships. And now you get more teams because, I have the chance to be on TV.
There it is right there. That's fair. I get the chance to be on TV. How many times did I get the chance to be on TV to play on ESPN? Not as many as it should have been. Not as many as it should have been. We've had the 84 Olympics and the 94 Olympics on our home court. We should have been blowing up, leading up to and after, and sustaining. We should have been able to sustain from 84 to 96. We should have been able to sustain from 96 until now, based on whatever was put into our sport to make everybody take notice of us. We shouldn't be a third, fourth level sport anymore. We shouldn't be. With all of the efforts that were put in, just with what I know from the Atlanta community and all that we did in the grassroots and all of that, there still should be a thriving portal of handball being played in the U.S.
Absolutely. And, the one thing, it's funny because I did my senior synopsis on this, and it was how did the WNBA was able to get 20-plus years. One, they didn't compete with the NBA. They stayed out of their way, and they created their own season in the summer. If you have a season where you don't compete with football, you don't compete with basketball, and you kind of compete a little bit with baseball, which most of the time we already know you don't watch baseball until, playoff time. So if you have a handball season, if you have a handball season from February to, I want to say, July, here's the plus. One, you're not competing with the other sports as far as different time slots or anything. Two, when the NBA Finals ends in June, that's when the playoffs kick in July for handball from the end of June to July. Also, if it's an Olympic year and we qualify, those players are still playing until July, and now you can go in right away to prepare for the Olympics. So you have all of that from February into August, where one, there's a lot of downtime, especially if a team gets swept in the NBA, and two, where during the course of the week, where there's nothing going on, you can have handball submitted in there.
That's how it is in Europe. Yeah, handball games every week.
And I think, sorry, just to piggyback really quickly, like that's a part of the American athletic pedigree that we have to incorporate in any of these thoughts. You know what I'm saying? We have to know not to try to step on another league or another sport. Myself, I really feel like, success can definitely be measured that way. But, honestly, if we get, 10 more colleges, 5 to 6, 10 more women's programs at colleges that already have men's programs. If we get more high school or middle schools involved, so we're not just, giving this to people for, 5, 10, 12 years, and then they're on to the next thing. These are all, kind of signs of success in my eyes.
Funny thing, this is a little bit above where we're talking about, but it was talked about many years ago, but putting handball in the Winter Olympics, do you know what that would do for us? If we're not competing with track, basketball, soccer, swimming, gymnastics, but we're in essence competing with viewership for bobsled, for hockey, for luge, for skiing.
Hey, don't forget about curling.
I love
we
curling.
won't get time with curling on.
Curling. I love curling. Love my friends from Canada. But nonetheless, just that change from what was to trying something different. Yeah. You don't know what that could do for us, and we just lost Myles.
We just lost Myles. Oh, well, we are going to have to wrap up here. In fact, guys, I was just looking for you guys to solve the problem of African American participation. I wasn't looking for you to solve everything. But hey, yeah, that would be excellent.
Funny how that works, right? You solve the African American problem, you solve everybody's problem.
That is a very good point. To me, what you envision would be part of that. Obviously, if you're going to have a college national championships on TV, I would like to see the level of play higher, and I like to see some of those same athletes that are playing NCAA basketball or football. Maybe not that level, but some high quality guys playing handball.
It's funny.
Funny thing. Back in '96, we had a few pro athletes come to us and train with us. One in particular was Rick Fox. Rick Fox was a fish out of water on the handball court. Put him on the basketball court, he can make shots, how to pass the ball. On the handball court, he tried to shoot the ball with nobody in front of him and fell. So I think having everybody think that, okay, well, we had LeBron. Yeah, LeBron is a freak of nature. He could throw the ball. I'm sure he would have no problem shooting the ball. But he's not the average basketball player. Yeah. He's a freak. So if we get the average pro, let them come out and play handball with us. I welcomed everybody that came on the court. I didn't care who you were. Bruh, this is my domain. You may dunk on me on the court, but I'm going to score on you on this handball court. I'm going to hit you in a way that you're going to be like, damn, can they do that? Yep, we can.
Absolutely.
We need that because I was a pro on my court. I don't care what you call it. I'm a pro here. This is my house. Let me show you what we do. Let me show you why this is wonderful. Let me show you why this is fabulous. And then that changes some things because it's not just about, oh, we need basketball players. No, we need athletes, because there's plenty of basketball players who can't do this. Let's just go and call. There's plenty who can't do this. There's plenty who won't catch up on that 3-step thing. It takes a minute to get that 3-step thing. So it'll be funny, but it's necessary.
And I'm gonna piggyback on that. Like, the main fight right now of not putting handball on TV is they're always talking about we don't have a product or some of the games are not good. Everything on TV is worth it. Reason why? If somebody trips over their feet or somebody does something silly, the average person is going to say, oh, I can do this better.
I can do that better. Yeah.
So if you can do it better, you come and join us. Yeah. Then the next person going to say, if you can do it, I can do it. And then it's a domino effect of all of those people. Next thing you know, you have more than you thought you would have. And now the product gets better and better because, one, the owner or the coach is going to try and recruit better because he don't want his team to be a meme, which is the new thing now, or, get joked on. So his recruiting style is going to change. He's going to try and find ways to go through loopholes or whatever and get a better team so it could be a better product out. Like, perfect example. What you said about 10 minutes ago about West Point men winning 15 in a row on College Nationals. The women was the same way. 9 months before that, Penn State women was tripping over their toes, couldn't catch a ball, and then what happened when me and you broadcast that game, John Ryan, at College Nationals?
It was a major upset.
Penn State, in their first year, not even a full 12 months, came and upsetted West Point women to win the national championship. Like, that right there, that film should be on TV. That is a American story right there because they came, started 9 months. The first scrimmage, West Point Black beat them by 50 in the first scrimmage. And then 9 months later, to turn it around, one, you tied them in the round robin, and then you wound up beating them. That right there should be televised. That should be told. That coming out of our mouths only sounds like a myth. Mm-hmm. But if it was televised and everybody saw it, now this Penn State, some kid is gonna try and make a documentary of the next Miracle Part 2 and have it out there. But it actually happened, and if that was on ESPN Plus, that would be going for a full 2 weeks. That's
100%. I mean, you think about what the Olympics have meant to America, right? When we watch TV, you all get these backstories from Bob Coughlin.
The backstory. Yeah.
An athlete, you are personally involved with this person. You're attached to this person. So like you said, to create these stories, I mean, every year, like if we do, for instance, get college nationals or open nationals, on television, we need to have people creating these backstories, talking about how this guy made him torn, Negro, Serbia, Armenia, wherever, you can talk about the different components of each club, and the successes and struggles that they've had. This is part of our overall kind of pedigree as Americans. We love a tough story. We love a Rocky type underdog story. And we love to feel involved personally with those that are, that we're watching.
Yeah. Well, we've been at this for over an hour. I think I'll try and wrap it up a little bit here. I'll tell you what I want for that story. To bring it back to the original topic, I want Howard University with either Derek or maybe I don't know what school down there. Maybe it could be San Diego State.
Let's bring it back to Benedict. Hell, this started with Benedict. Let's bring it back to Benedict.
Well, I'm going geography here, and then maybe AIC, Divine Jackson coaching the team. And I want to see that team be that surprise team of like, who are these guys? Majority African American, to give that visual to people to say, hey, this isn't just some I don't know, basketball version of rugby with mostly a bunch of white guys that couldn't make the basketball team, but a solid team, to show the world what can be done, and a Texas Western for handball, because I think it could be done without too much difficulty, because the level of talent is not that high right now, particularly in the college game. But
they'll change the rules on us if we make that happen. You know that, right?
I still say, and I think that was part of the discussion that I think we kind of came to a consensus with, was handball's very welcoming, and they would love to have more African Americans playing, but we just haven't figured out the best way of making that happen, and it's mostly.
I'm gonna let that float right there for right now. We don't have enough time to really dig too deep into that. As far as they would love that to happen, just let that sit for right now, John. We can talk about that another day.
We can talk about it another time, but heck, we all know everybody. I'm sure we could take a straw poll. We don't even have to take a straw poll. We could take a poll of everybody who cares about handball in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I would say majority, would be more than happy to get more African Americans playing, assuming that they're going to be great players, and we'll go from there. That's my opinion. I'm coming from a different perspective than you guys.
Yeah, no worries.
But I think for the most part, you guys were saying that there's not a whole lot of overt. There's some covert, but I think for the most part it's because we can't figure out how to do it right.
That's okay.
And I am open to suggestions. And I bet you that Barry Siff and USA Team Handball is open to suggestions on how to get greater African American participation. I mean, you saw his memo. It seemed to me that he was definitely interested in that.
And having an open dialogue is good. It's always good to have an open dialogue. Putting metrics in place, that's all good. Actionable items are all good. It has to translate. It has to translate into results. And what are the results that we're talking about? Right now, we're talking about more of a presence with our African American community in team handball on a higher level coming down, not just on a, hey, they're on the court running around. They'll never make a national team, but we got a lot of black people playing. That's not enough. That's not enough for me. And so I need to see 50%. You didn't ask me, but you asked them. I want to see 50% American-born black athletes on the men and women's team. Start off 5 years. 50%.
Wow.
That's just 8 players. They ain't even got to be the stars. I hope they would be. They probably would be if they were given a chance. But give me 8. Give me 8. And the black goalie. That's what I want to see.
Well, I tell you what.
You know what's funny about that?
Nico Robinson.
Oh, man.
I don't know what Nico's exact ethnic makeup is, but we already got you somebody who I don't know for sure. He just looks like he has some African American in him.
I have a black goalie, and even with a torn rotator cuff, he was goalie. He was a goalkeeper of the tournament, so that was fun.
Right there, bro. I'm not crazy enough to get in the goal, but I'm just saying we need to have somebody who is.
Well, Derek, I thought that was a bold statement. Does anybody else have any bold statements that they want to promulgate? Devine Jackson, as you work for USA Team Handball, do you have anything that you want to say that might get you fired?
I do want to say that I'm definitely going to try and be on one of the staffs. That's definitely a good plan of mine to, stick with coaching and try and, if it's not the junior team, hopefully the senior team when my playing days are over. So I'm still battling with my boy Gary, my brother for life. So we're 35 and still going strong.
Excellent. Myles, any closing thoughts?
Just a couple things to kind of echo and wrap some of this. It's awesome that Barry Sif put out a statement. I think it's a positive step for sure. But let's take the next step. Kind of like what Derek said. Let's actually have an engaging talk. Let's figure out from others, from blacks that have been a part of this sport and know more of the inside of what handball is in America to black people. Then we could come up with a little bit more of a plan. We can speak optics all day, but until we actually have a plan to go forward, we're literally just kind of almost kicking the can, as it were. I look forward to an engagement of ideas with, Barry Sif, with, Mike Cavanaugh, with whomever, to really truly have an open discussion that gets results. We can talk all day, but action is the ultimate form of sincerity. Change behavior. We're really kind of stuck in some of this. I'll look out for my guy if you look out for your guy. That kind of thing. We got to get out of that. We've got to lose some of that. Chum old boys networking that has happened with USA Team Handball. And that's no disrespect to any one or two individuals. That is just the way things have been. And clearly we keep running into the same results and wondering why things haven't changed.
Yeah. If I don't have it right in front of me right now, but one of the things in that newsletter opening talked about a diversity and inclusion committee. And just talking to you guys, all three of you guys would be great representatives on that committee. So that's something, we don't want it to be just talk,
Right.
but we wanted to, I think some actionable things could come out of a committee like that. And I think this is the current climate. I think it's a great opportunity for not just you guys, but anybody listening to this to consider ways that we can increase that participation rate and bring team handball forward in general, because that was another great point. You solve the African American problem, you're going to solve handball's problem too, maybe to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But, guys, it was a great education, and I really appreciate you taking some time to chat about this topic. For Derek Brown, Myles Bacon, Devine Jackson, I'm John Ryan, and thanks for listening.